High school was never my favorite place. It wasn't just the endless classes, the crowded hallways, or the cafeteria food that somehow always tasted the same no matter what you ordered. It was the lingering feeling that you were always being watched, always being judged. I went to a relatively small high school in a suburban town. Everyone seemed to know each other, and secrets didn't stay hidden for long. That's probably why what happened to me hit so hard. Echoes to this day, nobody knows who the person was or how they got in. This happened my junior year. I had just finished basketball practice one cold evening in late January. The practices always dragged on until around 7 or 7:30, so by the time we were done, it was pitch dark outside. Most of the guys would rush out of the locker room as soon as the coach dismissed us. But I had a bad habit of taking my time, checking my phone, scrolling through social media, and then changing out of my sweaty practice clothes. That night, the locker room had emptied out faster than usual. I remember distinctly hearing the heavy door slam shut behind the last of my teammates. That left me alone in the quiet, echoey space. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and the smell of old socks and cheap deodorant clung to the air. I sat on the wooden bench, untying my sneakers, when I heard a sound. It was subtle, almost like fabric brushing against something metal. I froze for a second, then shook it off as one of the lockers shifting from me, moving around. But when I went back to scrolling on my phone, I heard it again, this time clearer. Like someone was adjusting inside a locker. I lowered my phone, staring across the rows of tall blue lockers. "Hello." I called out, no answer. The locker room was dead silent, except for the buzz of the lights. I went back to unlacing my shoes, trying to convince myself I was being paranoid. But the sound came again. This time, it was a soft, almost deliberate tap on metal. I stood up. The locker room stretched into 2 rows, each lined with lockers and ending at the showers. Slowly, I walked down one row, peeking into the empty showers at the end. Nothing. My footsteps echoed on the tile floor as I turned back. That's when I noticed it. One locker door, about 3 spaces down from mine, wasn't shut all the way. It was slightly cracked open, just enough that you could see the darkness inside. My heart started pounding, but I forced myself closer. "Seriously, who's in here?" "This isn't funny," I said, trying to sound tougher than I felt. No reply. I reached out, my hand trembling, and yanked the locker door open. It was empty. I let out a shaky laugh, telling myself I was just freaking out over nothing. But as I pushed the locker shut again, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. On the inside of the door, etched into the paint with something sharp, were the words, "Don't stay alone." The hairs on the back of my neck stood straight. Up. I backed away, breathing heavily. I grabbed my bag, shoved my sneakers inside, and started heading for the exit. But before I could reach the door, I heard it again. A noise. From the showers this time. This wasn't the sound of fabric or tapping. It was breathing. Slow, heavy breathing, echoing faintly off the tile. I froze mid-step. The air suddenly felt heavier, like the whole room was closing in on me. I turned toward the showers, and for the first time, I saw it movement. A shadow shifting just beyond the corner. I didn't wait to confirm what I was seeing. I sprinted for the exit, shoving the heavy locker room door open and stumbling into the dimly lit hallway outside. My heart was beating so fast I thought it would burst out of my chest. I kept running until I was out the back doors of the school, into the freezing night air. I didn't stop until I reached my car. when I finally got inside and locked the doors. I sat there, shaking, staring back at the darkened school building. The thought that someone had been in there with me watching made me feel sick. The next day, I told my coach about it. He brushed it off at first, saying maybe I was just tired or spooking myself. But after some convincing, he agreed to check the locker room when he came back. He was pale. He told me he'd found something in the showers near the far corner. There had been a set of wet footprints on the tile, bare feet, and they didn't match any of the team members, who had all left wearing their shoes. Security was notified, and the school supposedly reviewed the camera footage. But here's the thing, they never found anyone. Nobody came in after practice. Nobody left. It was like whoever was in there never existed. But I know what I heard and what I saw. For the rest of that year, I never stayed late in the locker room again. If practice ended, I was the first one out the door, no matter what. Even now, years later, I can't help but wonder who was in there that night, and why. Were they hiding? And sometimes, late at night, I still hear the echo of those words carved into that locker. Don't stay alone. High school can feel like a prison sometimes. Same classes, same people, same hallways every single day. But every once in a while, something unusual would break the routine. Sometimes that meant a pep rally or a snow day, and sometimes it meant a substitute teacher. Most kids didn't mind subs. They usually meant an easy day, less work, maybe even a movie if you were lucky. But when I think back on it now, the day we got a substitute for my sophomore English class was the single most unsettling experience of my life. It was late October, right around Halloween. The mornings were darker, and the air carried that cold bite that hinted winter was coming. When I walked into English, I noticed right away that our usual teacher, Mrs. Collins, wasn't there instead. Sitting at her desk was a man I had never seen before. He was Taliesin, 6'3" with pale, almost grey skin that looked sickly under the classroom lights. His hair was black, combed too neatly, like every strand was forced into place, and his eyes were strange. They were this dull, washed-out blue, but the way he looked at each of us as we walked in made me feel like I was being studied. Not in a normal teacher way, more like a predator sizing up prey. The room was unusually quiet as everyone sat down. Usually there'd be chatter, laughter, the usual teenage noise. But that day, almost everyone went silent. On the board, in tall, sharp handwriting, were the words, "Mr. Grayson, substitute." He didn't say anything at first. He just sat there, his long fingers steepled together, staring at us. After an uncomfortable silence, he stood up. "Good morning, class," he said. His voice was low, but too smooth. Like every word was carefully rehearsed. Nobody responded. A couple of kids muttered good morning under their breath, but most of us just waited. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Today, we will be reading." That was it. No instructions, no assignment sheet. He just walked slowly around the room, his shoes making almost no sound on the tile. Then he stopped beside one of the students, a girl named Alyssa. He leaned down just slightly, his face uncomfortably close to hers, and whispered, "Read." The entire room watched as she nervously picked up her copy of the novel we'd been working on and started reading aloud. Her voice was shaky at first, but she got through the first page. When she finished, he straightened up, gave the slightest nod, and moved on. Next was a boy named Marcus. Again, He leaned down, his pale face too close, and said, "Read." Marcus started reading, his voice echoing in the dead silent room. And so it continued, student after student. He didn't just ask us to read, commanded it. And nobody disobeyed. When he got to me, my throat went dry. He bent down, his strange eyes staring directly into mine. "Read," he whispered. I tried to swallow the lump in my throat and started reading from the page. My voice cracked once, and I could feel my hands trembling as I held the book. He didn't move until I was finished. Then, finally, he turned away and continued his slow pacing. The longer it went on, the more wrong it felt. His behavior wasn't just strict, it was unsettling. He never blinked. He never looked at the book himself. He just watched us, each and every one, like he was memorizing our faces, our voices, our movements. Halfway through class, the intercom crackled. "Attention, staff, due to a power issue. All teachers, please keep students in classrooms until further notice." The lights flickered, and for just a second, the entire room went dark. When they came back on, Mr. Grayson was standing at the back of the room, his eyes fixed on the door. Nobody had seen him move. The air felt heavy, and the silence was suffocating. Finally, one of the bravest students, a guy named Eric, raised his hand. Mr. Grayson, can we maybe do something else?" This is kinda he didn't get to finish. Grayson was suddenly at his desk, his hand flat on the surface, his face inches from Eric's. "Read," he hissed. Eric froze, wide-eyed. His voice cracked as he picked up the book and stumbled through a paragraph. Grayson didn't move until he was done. Then he just smiled again. But it wasn't the kind of smile a teacher gives when you've done a good job. It was too wide, too sharp, like he was enjoying something only he understood. The rest of class dragged on painfully slow. When the bell finally rang, everyone shot out of their seats, desperate to escape. But Mr. Grayson blocked the door. "One at a time," he said, his voice smooth but firm. "Say goodbye." We hesitated, but nobody wanted to test him. One by one, each student said goodbye, Mr. Grayson, as they passed. He stared into each person's eyes as they left. When it was my turn, I felt his cold gaze lock onto me. "Goodbye, Mr. Grayson," I muttered. He leaned down, close enough that I could feel his breath against my ear. "I'll see you again." I nearly ran out of the classroom. The next day, Mrs. Collins was back. She acted like nothing unusual had happened. But when someone asked about Mr. Grayson, her face went blank. "There was no substitute yesterday," she said. "I was out sick, but the school couldn't find anyone to cover." You all had a study hall. The entire class went silent. We exchanged nervous glances, but nobody said anything else. Later that week, a few of us tried asking the office about him, but there was no record of a Mr. Grayson ever working for the school district. No application, no ID, nothing. It was like he never existed, and yet, all of us remembered him. Vivid with pale skin, the dull blue eyes, the way he made us read. To this day, I can't explain it. Sometimes I wonder if he was just some stranger who slipped through the cracks of security. But then I remember what he whispered to me as I left that room. "I'll see you again." And sometimes, when I'm reading alone at night, I feel like I'm not alone. Like someone is there, just beyond my vision, watching silently, waiting for me to read. My high school offered a program called Night Class for kids who needed extra credit or wanted to make up missed assignments. It wasn't mandatory, but I signed up during my senior year because I had been slacking off and needed to pass. English to graduate. Classes were held after school, usually starting around 6 p.m. and ending around 8. By then, the building was practically empty, except for a few staff members and the students in night class. At first, I thought it was kind of cool. The school felt completely different at night, quieter, darker, almost like a different world. The hallways that were usually crowded with noisy kids were empty and echoey. Even the fluorescent lights seemed dimmer at night. There were only about 12 of us in the program, along with a teacher named Mr. Harper. He was in his late 30s, kind of laid back, and didn't care much about strict rules. Most of the time, he just gave us assignments and let us work quietly. But it was during one of these sessions that something happened that I'll never forget. It was a Thursday night in early March. The air outside was freezing, and a storm was supposed to roll in later. As I walked into the school, I noticed how quiet everything was, even quieter than usual. When I reached the classroom, only 6 other students were there. Mr. Harper was late, which wasn't unusual. We all sat at our desks, chatting quietly or scrolling on our phones. About 10 minutes passed before the door finally opened. But it wasn't Mr. Harper who walked in. It was another man. He was tall and thin, with a dark coat that looked too heavy for indoors. His hair was messy, almost greasy, and he wore glasses that reflected the overhead lights, making it hard to see his eyes. "Mr. Harper couldn't make it tonight," he said, his voice flat and low. "I'll be supervising." Nobody questioned it. After all, substitutes weren't unusual. He didn't even introduce himself, just set down a small black notebook on the desk and looked at us. "Work quietly," he said. "No talking." The room fell into silence. At first, everything seemed normal. We pulled out our worksheets, and the only sounds were pencils scratching on paper and the faint hum of the lights. But after a while, I noticed the man wasn't sitting at the desk like a teacher normally would. He was standing at the back of the classroom, just standing there, watching. Every time I glanced over my shoulder, his face was pointed directly at us. He didn't move. He didn't blink. He just stared. After about 20 minutes, one of the students whispered to the person next to him. The man's voice cut through the silence immediately. "No talking." We all froze. Jamie looked down at his paper, his face pale. A few minutes later, another student, Sarah, got up to throw something in the trash. The man stepped forward suddenly. "Sit," he snapped. His voice wasn't just strict, it was harsh, almost threatening. Sarah sat back down without a word. The air in the room grew heavy. Nobody dared move after that. Eventually, I looked at the clock. It was 7:30, half an hour left. My stomach was in knots, and my pencil tapped nervously against the desk. That's when I heard it. A whisper. At first I thought it was one of the students, but when I looked around, everyone else had their heads down, silent. The whisper came again, closer. This time, it sounded like it was coming from the walls. I strained to listen, and I swear I heard words. Faint, drawn-out words, like someone chanting, "Don't leave." The hairs on my arms stood straight up. I looked at the man at the back of the room. He was smiling now, just slightly. The whispering grew louder. A couple of other students lifted their heads, looking around nervously. Finally, Jamie couldn't take it anymore. "What the hell is that?" he said, his voice trembling. The man's smile widened. "Quiet," he whispered. The lights flickered overhead. For a moment, the entire room went dark. When the lights came back on, the man wasn't at the back of the room anymore. He was standing right in the middle of us. A couple of students gasped. One even stood up, backing toward the door. "I'm leaving," she said. The man tilted his head slowly, like he was curious. Then he said something that chilled me to the bone. "You can't leave until I say you can." The girl yanked the door open, but when she stepped into the hallway, she froze. The hallway was pitch black, not just dim, but completely black, like the lights had been cut off. "Mr. Harper," she called out, her voice echoing into the void. No answer. She turned back toward the classroom, her face pale with fear. The man was smiling wider now, his teeth showing in the fluorescent light. That's when Sarah, the girl who had tried to stand earlier, whispered, "This isn't a substitute." The man's expression darkened instantly. "Quiet," he hissed again. His voice was deeper now, unnatural, like more than one person was speaking at once. The lights flickered violently, and for a split second, I saw something impossible. His shadow on the wall wasn't shaped like a man. It was twisted, stretched out with long, spindly limbs that reached toward the ceiling. A few of us screamed. Someone shoved the desk aside, and chaos erupted. Students bolted for the door, pushing into the dark hallway. I followed, my heart pounding in my chest. The hallway felt endless, the lockers stretching on forever. Behind us, I could hear footsteps, slow, heavy footsteps that didn't match the frantic pace of our running. "Don't leave." The whispering echoed again, louder this time. It was everywhere around us, above us, inside us. We didn't stop running until we burst through the front doors of the school. Cold night air hit my face, and I nearly collapsed on the pavement outside. When I looked back, the front entrance of the school was normal. The lights were on, the hallways were lit, and there was no sign of the man. A few minutes later, headlights pulled into the parking lot. It was Mr. Harper. He looked confused, asking why we were all outside in the cold. We tried to explain, but he just shook his head. He swore he had only been gone for half an hour, handling a meeting in the office. He said no substitute had been assigned. The school's security cameras were checked the next day. They showed us all sitting in the classroom, working quietly. No strange man, no chaos, no running through the halls, but we all remember it. Every single one of us. And sometimes, late at night, I still hear that whisper in the back of my head, "Don't leave." Thanks for watching tonight's stories. If you enjoyed them, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more horror stories every week. Which story disturbed you the most? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.